Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. There's just all kinds of them, I guess. And what makes those appealing to us? What makes them popular? Why do we want to watch? Why do they grab our attention? Why do you think? They give away large sums of money, right? Because we all think, that could be me. Right? Why have lotteries and casinos become so much more popular and lucrative in our country in the last few decades, do you think? And not so long ago, most all forms of gambling were illegal in most of our 50 states, save for one. But now in many states, politicians have viewed gambling as just another revenue stream to tap into while ignoring the lives that are ruined by it. Many laws have changed so that most states now allow some form of legal gambling. We just might want to remember that our ancestors passed laws against organized gambling for some very good reasons. Why do some people have such a desire to risk losing what they have worked so hard to obtain in order to get more? Because of the oldest desire that has been afflicting humankind since the beginning of time. Greed. Because we always seem to want more than we have, and because we always seem to want a little more than our neighbor has. Isn't that true? So let me ask, how many of you today would say that you are a wealthy person? How many of you are a wealthy person? What do you think, about half raised their hand? Now think about that hard. You know, we Americans live in one of the freest and richest nations on earth. According to Wikipedia, we rank 4th in the world in disposable family income. 4th among nations. We have more than enough. What we consider poor in this country would be considered wealthy in many other nations on the planet. Some of the poorest nations on earth, by the way, they're all in sub-Saharan Africa, have an average household income of approximately $300 to $500 a year. Think about that. I think our average was somewhere around $46,000. Compare that. As I drive down the highway, I see many cars with bumper stickers on them that say, "God bless America." But hasn't God already blessed us? Luke 12:48 reads, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be required. And from him who has been entrusted with much, even more will be demanded." What would be our answer if we were asked what we are doing with all the wealth that God has entrusted us with? In our text this morning, Jesus is approached by someone having a dispute over an inheritance with his brother. And the problem is that he wants to have Jesus settle this quarrel that has developed between him and his brother, probably because each brother wants more than their share. And Jesus says, "Who appointed me a judge over you?" But Jesus sees much more in this situation than just a disagreement. He sees envy and greed and two brothers who each want too much. Jesus then makes this simple statement about greed and the desire to always have more, to always have the biggest and the best, to always have more than the people around us. I like how the Amplified Bible renders verse 15. It reads this way. And he said to them, guard yourselves and keep free from all covetousness, the immoderate desire for wealth, the greedy longing to have more. For man's life does not consist and is not derived from possessing overflowing abundance, or that which is over and above his needs. Jesus gave a plain answer with a plain meaning and then he fleshed it out with his well-known story about the rich fool. But what makes this man's behavior foolish or wrong? Many of us might believe it's that he's acting shrewdly, that he's being responsible. After all, he is taking what he has legitimately earned and is preparing for the future, right? Don't most of us do the same thing? Preparing for our retirement? We work and we save now so we can hopefully reach a point sometime in our lives when we will have such an abundance that we will no longer have to work. We can just kick back and take life easy. But the behavior that Jesus points out is not in the saving up. It isn't in the having. It is in the man's motivation for saving up and hoarding his excess. Who does he consult as he makes this decision about what to do? God? His neighbors? Or family members, perhaps? No, only himself. He is so full of himself, so arrogant that not only does he not give God any credit for his abundance, but he believes he is the only one who is worthy to help him make this important decision as to what he should do with all of his wealth. And the attitude of the two brothers having the dispute over their inheritance demonstrates very clearly how wealth and possessions can cause us to become self-centered and greedy if we're not careful. In this situation, we often selfishly fail to consider how our actions will affect other people. What do you believe is the worst flaw in this man's character? It's not that he's wealthy or that he has an abundance of possessions. We can only assume by the story that we are told that he acquired all of these perfectly honestly. We're not told otherwise. The tragic flaw in this man's character is that with all that he has been given, he never once considers sharing his abundance or giving away his excess to those around him who are in need. Instead of filling his barns with all that God has blessed him with, and then giving away the rest, he's going to spend a lot of his money, his resources, to tear down his old barns and build newer, bigger ones. Even though he has more than he can ever use. And there are certainly people around him who are in need. His selfish attitude is what really makes him foolish, because Jesus tells us that he will die that night, and that all he has hoarded away and prepared for himself will go to someone else. Jesus says that anyone who lays up for himself treasures on earth but has not nurtured his relationship with God is a fool. The implication here is that by giving a proper attention to our relationship with God and being generous in our giving to others, we lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. How tragic this is for the man in our story, and yet how many of us are doing, well, things kind of the same. If we're honest about our desire for things, our hunger for more and more stuff, are we not also afflicted with the same malady? Have we become a nation of stuffed barns? Let me give you a very sobering statistic about our society. Do you know what one of the fastest growing businesses has been in the last 30 years? And it's still growing, by the way. Anybody have an idea?
Self-storage.
You're right. You're exactly right. Self-storage units have been really popping up all over the place in the last 2 to 3 decades. Just think, how many have been built around here in the last 20 years? Most of us live in houses that are twice the size of our grandparents. And we have fewer children. But yet we can't even get all our stuff into our homes. We have to rent outside storage space. And what's even worse, if you drive around town today, I'll bet you'll see, wait for after church, of course. I'll bet you'll see 2 or 3 cars sitting in the driveway. You know why? Because they got their garages stuffed so full of stuff they can't even get their car in the garage. Now, if I'm describing you, I'm sorry. I'm just pointing some things out, okay? If you compare America with the United Kingdom or Australia, we have 10 times as much self-storage space per person as they do. Well, let me ask, have you ever considered just giving away some of your excess stuff to someone who needs it? Or are we just as guilty as the man in our story by never once considering giving away our excess instead of building bigger barns? Or today, Jesus, when telling this story, might say, he went out and he rented storage space for his stuff. The Bible's very clear in its teaching on some very basic principles about money and possessions. And we can sum them up this way. God gives generously to us so that we might give to others. We are blessed so that we might be a blessing to others. We are loved so that we might show love toward others. We are forgiven so that we in turn can practice forgiveness. Consider the pitfalls of having much more than we really need. Some of the effects have been talked about quite a bit in the media in just the last few years, from the First Lady to other parts of the media pointing out some of the things that are affecting our society. Like the fact that our children have become the most overweight, inactive, and spoiled crop of kids that we have ever produced in this country, according to some. The warning Jesus gives to us is a sobering one. Our well-fed, affluent lifestyles can and are leading us away from being rich toward God. The declining attendance in this country in our churches is just one symptom that this is taking place. Being rich toward God is an attitude, and it is a way of living. Perhaps we should say that it's an attitude that produces a godly lifestyle. I knew a man once where I lived at one time who practiced this attitude well. At least I thought he practiced it well. He was active in his church and in his community, and even though he was a retired railroader and could have afforded a much fancier home than he had, he still lived in the same little bungalow that he had lived in for the last 40 years. He was an active member of many service organizations in his community. He was a Mason, he was a Shriner, a Lion, an Odd Fellow, and he served on the Historical Society. And if you ever stop by his house hoping to just have a word with him, you had a hard time catching him home a lot. People used to ask him why he didn't back off and just take life a little easier. After all, they'd remind him, you're retired. But he used to say that he was not working toward retirement, but he was working toward expirement. And what he meant by that statement was that he was working towards a higher goal. What he was really working and saving for was his future in heaven, not on earth. I asked him once how he defined success, and if he thought that he was successful. And he said to me that he believed he was, because he defined success not in just being wealthy or not in the amount of stuff he had managed to accumulate in his lifetime, but having enough to be independent. And the reason behind that was so that he could work not just to support himself, but he could work for others. He could work for causes that he believed in. He could work for things that would make a difference in the lives of people, and in some small way to make the world a better place. I think his attitude was summed up very well by the bumper sticker they had on the back of his old pickup truck. It said, "Live simply so others can simply live." Jesus' parable reminds me of the old man who once prayed this simple prayer. Lord, give me enough so that I will not be tempted to steal. But Lord, do not give me so much, too much, lest I may think I no longer need you. Ask yourself this question. How much would I be worth if I lost all my money? Would friends and family quickly step in to help you out? Because of all the times in the past that you have helped them out when they were in need? Because you are rich toward God and you have been a generous giver most of your life? Don't just work toward retirement. That is just a short-term goal. Keep your eyes on the bigger picture, like I believe my friend was doing. Work toward expirement. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for all that you have given to us, for you have been very generous. We live in one of the richest, freest nations in the world. But with all that you have given us also comes responsibility. Lord, help us to use what you have given to us in such ways that we can make the world a better place.